Welcome to Unschool, where we undoctrinate you from public school nonsense. Today we're discussing the idea that masculinity is no vice and that there's nothing wrong with being a guy at all, or a boy, or anything like that, even though the public schools believe something else and push these uncomfortable narratives that boys are somehow toxic. And it's just not the case. It's unfortunate that people are coming out of public schools believing that. And a lot of that has contributed to the decline in outcomes for boys in education. We see now that close to 2/3 of women in are the close to 2/3 of those attending college are females. So men are dropping out of college quite quickly. And now, in recent years, women are starting to do it a little bit as well. And it'll be interesting to see if that continues to increase. But first off, we're going to listen to this video from this guy, Jason Williams, who says masculinity is not toxic.
Masculinity. There appears to be many forms of it, but does this one word comprehensively define what it means to be a man? Let's take a look at its definition. Having qualities traditionally ascribed to men as strength and boldness. Masculinity itself is not toxic. However, a man becomes toxic when he allows his humanity to only be defined by masculinity. Let's use the pit bull terrier as an example. For decades, this dog was bred to be an aggressive protector and fighter. This eventually caused this beautiful breed to become unstable and volatile. If not for the relentless efforts of dog rescue initiatives, the masses would have never known that the pit bull terrier is also a loving, compassionate companion and family dog. Please don't misconstrue what I'm saying, because I am very masculine. However, I am no longer confined by its limited definition. I am a comprehensive man of the Most High, courageous, but also compassionate, strong, but sensitive. My brothers, we are human, so let's embrace our humanity and no longer allow our lives to be limited by masculinity.
So I thought that video was pretty good. He could have mentioned the importance of fathers in teaching men to take reasonable levels of risk. Males are more physically aggressive than women, but there's plenty of positive ways that you can use that. I also did martial arts and boxing growing up and basketball and stayed active, and I still run quite often. So there's ways that you can expend that energy that result in positive outcomes. So that's what's to focus on. And I think that males without any male influence when they're growing up are the ones that tend to end up in prison or in, some other level of trouble that's not beneficial for them or for society. I'm not a big fan of this ridiculous comment down here, but this is how the college campus indoctrinated think, right? The public school indoctrinated. He says racism, homophobia, and sexism are the foundations and building blocks of how masculinity is socialized to boys and men. I don't think that's true at all. For most men, masculinity cannot stand on its own without the oppression of people of color, gays, and women, which is indeed toxic. Although this person doesn't know it, they're actually speaking from a Marxist oppressive narrative, right? Because the Marxists believe that in historical materialism and the idea that you are a product of your environment and not capable of coming to your own conclusions about other people, there's nothing in masculinity that says you need to oppress others. Only in Marxism do they believe, and the ideologies that are derivative of that, like critical race theory and queer theory and fat consciousness, and also even in women's studies, it's kind of like women's Marxism. Do they learn that people are just a product of their political identity and that's it? So, I mean, this is why they actually become the ones who oppress others a lot of the time, because they think that if you won't accept their differing ideology, that you are somehow toxic and inhuman. And they say that about you while they're exemplifying that in their own personal lives, which is really unfortunate because this guy's basically saying that men are incapable of being respectful towards others. And that certainly couldn't be further from the truth. Both men and women throughout our culture and others are not interested in hurting other people or ruining other people's lives. Most people try to be good on a daily basis. So That's my perspective. I think people are um, a little bit too negative and too focused on chiding masculinity these days because it does have a lot of positive attributes. So we see in this definition from it's the first Google search result. They're being quite negative in their definition of men. They're saying that again, masculinity is just a product of your environment. There's nothing intrinsic about males biologically that's different than women. This is the opinion they seem to be advocating for here, saying it's defined socially, historically, and politically rather than being biologically driven. I don't think that's the case at all. Men have more testosterone than women. They're more physically aggressive. Women do have a tendency to be a bit more nurturing, although modern feminists, at least from second wave feminism onward, seem to deny that reality. And I think that's unfortunate. I watched a video of Gloria Steinem years ago where she was saying that women are not more nurturing than men. And as a man, I don't think that's true. I think on average, women are more nurturing than men, but there's always exceptions to the rule. But if you only live in this Marxist worldview of oppressor versus oppressed narrative, then you can't deal with nuance. And I think that that's really unfortunate and actually lowers your ability to reason and therefore your intelligence. It involves displaying attitudes and behaviors that signify and validate maleness, and involves being recognized in particular ways by other men and women. In modern society, this is where it really gets ridiculous. The term has shifted to represent ultra nationalism or attitudes of superiority. What? No, I would say masculinity is more about being confident in who you are and respecting other people for who they are. Some say that the current definition of masculinity is very limited, and it's not. And it's that limited understanding of what it is to be male that may lead us to aggression. Again, men, like, there's positive ways to exert your aggression, right? And other men teach uh, other men or boys how to do that. That's why father figures are so important. And the ones who, again, as I said before, don't have that experience, don't learn how to deal with it. But most men by far are not criminals. I mean, geez. So this all this nonsense about these are just people who think that men are automatically drawn to alt right whatever, and there's just that couldn't be further from the case. So here's another article from Big Think that says toxic masculinity is invented, and they make the point that the people who criticize toxic masculinity often can't really define it, and I don't think they defined it here at all. They just threw out a bunch of buzzwords, political buzzwords that don't mean anything, and as this is not really a definition at all. So it says here the number of articles using the term prior to 2015 never exceeded 20 in academia, that is, and almost all mentions were in scholarly journals, but with the rise of some political movements, it became more common. By 2017, there were thousands of mentions, mostly in the mainstream media. So it's a buzzword now, even though it's not, there's no strict definition. Mostly in the mainstream. Harrington points out that the term is almost never defined, even by academics, and is instead used to simply signal disapproval. And it's just another phrase with it, along with a plethora of other ideas that people falsely use to describe their opposing political views, right? So they won't say somebody's a conservative. They'll say they're an ultra nationalist or something. And it's a kind of like it's like if the right says doesn't use the term liberal and instead calls everyone on the left a socialist or something is also not accurate. Lacking any coherent or consistent definition, the phrase now refers to any male behavior that the user disapproves of. Again, what the heck does masculinity have to do with ultra nationalism? Absolutely nothing. Or attitudes of superiority has nothing to do with that. It has been blamed, among other things, for mass shootings, gang violence, rape, online trolling, climate change, the financial crisis, Brexit, the election of Donald Trump, and an unwillingness to wear a mask during COVID-19. So basically, it means nothing. They don't have any way to define it. That's ridiculous. Lumping together terrorists and delinquents. Wow, that's an incredible stretch, isn't it? But it's true. They just try to put everyone under that category, like a middle school delinquent who's suffering from not attending school and failing grades. they're trying to associate with actual terrorists. That's incredible. And ultimately poisons the well, or the very idea of masculinity itself. Interviewing dozens of adolescent boys and young men for her book, Boys and Sex, Peggy Orenstein always asked them what they liked about being a boy. She says most drew a blank. Man, that's sad. That's interesting. One college sophomore told her, I never really thought about that. You hear a lot more about what is wrong with guys. Yes, women come out of public schools believing they're pretty princesses who deserve the guy who makes six figures, is 6 feet tall, is a gym bro, has a master's degree, um, you know, is the guy is willing to do all the cooking, and so on and so forth. And that person doesn't actually exist. So it's almost impossible to hit all of those elements. And then the boys come out of college believing that they are useless, which is pretty rough, or believing that they're toxic. Right? Boys and men have to find a way to be useful in society. Or unfortunately, it's a sad reality that that they'll have a hard time finding anyone who cares about them in life besides maybe their parents or their closest family members. Um, so yeah, as they say there, people think a lot more about what's wrong with guys, and they see things as the suppressor versus oppressed narrative. A lot of people are taught in public schools that history is just an example of men going out of their way to oppress women, and I couldn't be further from the truth. I think the biggest oppressor in human history is probably nature, right? Most because so many people have died from disease throughout human history. Are nearly, what is it, 200,000 years? Near something like 2/3 of children died before the age of 6 from disease, and mostly and sometimes starvation and other difficult factors. So it says very few boys and men are likely to react well to the idea that there's something toxic inside them. Of course not. That needs to be exorcised, right? I mean, that's almost a religious idea. Like they need to yeet the demon out of you if you're a male. Are you serious? Of course not. All right. This is especially true given that most of them identify strongly with their masculinity. 9 in 10 men and women describe themselves as either completely or mostly masculine or feminine. These gender identities are held quite strongly too. Almost half of men said that sex was extremely important to their identity, their sex. In another survey by Pew Research, a similar proportion of men, 46%, said that it was either very or somewhat important for others to see them as manly or masculine. Some of those men are probably that didn't say that was important with them, are probably afraid to admit the truth. In both surveys, the numbers were higher for women, right? Because men know that they'll be criticized for speaking confidently about their masculinity. In other words, most people identify pretty strongly as either masculine or feminine. It is a bad idea to send a cultural signal to half the population that there may be something intrinsically wrong with them. But, that's what ideologies of the derivative of Marxism do. They take that historical materialism and say, you're just a product of your political environment, and that's it. You're just a product of your political identity. You're not a person of intrinsic value. So, and they're out in there criticizing religion quite a lot, or humanism. Both of these things have a tendency to argue that people do have intrinsic value, and they are worth something, and they are deserving of respect. But that's not what a Marxist thinks. I think that you're only deserving of respect if you follow the same politics as them. The toxic masculinity framing alienates the majority of non-violent, non-extreme men, which is the majority of men by far. Most people, male or female, are not interested in hurting other people. They just, that's not in their who they are as people. So, and the ones that in prison that are interested in hurting other people often see themselves as victims. They think, oh, they were hurt, therefore it's okay for them to hurt others, and that's not okay. All right, let's move on to this book. I audiobooked this a while back. I don't remember all of it anymore, but it is quite interesting. Written by Christina Hoff Sommers, who still considers herself a feminist, I believe, but rejects quite a lot of modern feminism. And she says that the book is called "The War Against Boys: How Misguided Feminism Is Harming Our Young Men." And it says, despite popular belief, American boys should say lag behind girls in reading and writing ability, and they are less likely to go to college. Our young men are greatly at risk, yet the best known studies and experts insist that it's girls who are in need of our attention. And a lot of it is because they're focused more on outcomes like jobs. But there's a reality as well that roughly 50% of women don't want to work or want to work less than full time. So they're not as interested, it seems, in careers, whereas only about 20% of men don't want to work. So, and that's been the case for decades. So, I mean, you can go look up the statistics if you don't believe me, but that's pretty much been what people have said going back to like the 50s. It hasn't changed that much. The highly publicized girl crisis has led to many changes in American schools, politics, and parenting, but at what cost? In this provocative book, Summers argues that our society has continued to overemphasize the troubles of girls, while our boys suffer from the same self-esteem and academic problems. Boys need help, but not the sort of help they've been getting. And if you're a boy, it's hard to develop if you don't have anything physical to do and you're told that being, physically active is detrimental, right? Play is an important part of development. And they did even talk about that in school. I remember them doing it 20 years ago. But now when you go to college, they tell you as a male that you're automatically racist and sexist just for existing. So that's quite a change from, the early 2000s to now in 2024, where you're just seen as toxic regardless of what you've done in real life. And that's pretty unfortunate. Some of these comments are also quite interesting as well. First person, points out that people are rating the book low just because, it's critical of feminism. But Summers, I think, still she's got some great videos on YouTube you might check out. She's called like the Rational Feminist or something like that. I might not have that right, but she's pretty good. And it says here, Summers is focusing on boys as if she's not looking at the right group, even though she proves that girls are almost all getting all of the attention. So that's pretty true. And it's not bad that they're getting attention. It's unfortunate that part of that process is involved putting down boys, though. So a recent edition of the book replaces feminism with policies in the title, because the book's getting canceled by femcells because they can't handle a bit of open conversation or free speech. So, wow, this book gained some notoriety after a Tumblr feminist was shown burning it in a fireplace, calling it trash to keep warm. Wow, that's dark. Who burns books, right? Not the good guys. The fact that this is an important book is written off so easily as patriarchal garbage. Jeez, just proves to me that its detractors just haven't read it. Yeah, I don't think the patriarchy or the matriarchy is really all that bad. If it really just means positive things about males and females and the place that they choose to be in society. But they're labeled, the patriarchy is labeled as oppressive, which I think is ridiculous. This next comment, it's always an eye opener when a really good look at statistics shows some glaring errors in widely held assumptions. Yes, that is fun. It's even more of an eye opener to realize that some of your own careful held assumptions are wrong. So that's good. This Bradley person is open-minded. This book, published in 2001, seems kind of political and reactionary, but that is only the fault of the title. The contents are much more revealing. So, yeah, I mean, this push started a long time ago, even though it wasn't as extreme in the 2000s as it started to be in the 2010s. This person picked up the book after they learned from the kindergarten teacher that the children at her school were told not to run on the playground. Yeah, so again, physical activity is almost criminalized in the schoolyard, which is really unfortunate. On average, women score a little bit higher on verbal reasoning, I believe, and boys a little higher on spatial reasoning skills. And where is the building of things, the hands-on in public schools, right? About the only thing that happens is macaroni artwork, right? And then after that, you're pretty much done until you get to high school, and then you can work on a car in some schools or something. But there's not that many opportunities. But I think we're about to end the video here. Here's some solutions from Christina Hoff Sommers, who says that we could follow the lead of British and Australians who have studied the problem of male underachievement and have adjusted their curricula to foster a more structured environment, including high expectations, right? That's the furthest thing from what public schools want to emphasize these days. More competition, right? We cooperate in order to compete. Everyone, all human beings do that. They go out in society and they try to order the world. Frequent testing, massive attention to organizational skills, conduct more experiments with single sex learning environments. She exposes a misguided campaign by the ACLU, right, which doesn't have a great reputation, to discredit single sex education. Because, the reality is sometimes the learning styles are different between boys and girls. And it may, according to some of the things I've read, may matter more when they're younger than when they're older. When you get older, you learn to adjust, I suppose. Beginning a national campaign to promote male literacy. I suppose that might be good. I think a focus on just individualism, individual rights would be good. As Ayn Rand says, the smallest minority is the individual. And personally, I'm not really looking for a new identity politics movement. I would just rather see us not bringing down others in order to raise up someone else. Create more technical and vocational schools and programs. That would be great, especially if they could do it at lower levels, right? High school courses, specialized career training. Boys are thriving in programs such as aviation, mechanics, computer repair, and engineering. All things that you use your hands, I would think. So that sort of thing is going to be useful. And the U.S. Department of Education is way behind. That should just be completely abolished. It's never been effective. I think Jimmy Carter formed it, I believe, in order to get reelected. And, neither one of those things worked. So let's move on. All right. Please subscribe if you'd like to get more content like this. Let me know in the comments what you think.